We've heard from the medical experts. Yes, right? We've heard from Charles Jr. We've heard from the research experts. We've heard from people who work in the advocacy space and people who work at companies. And now we are going to learn from the caregiver experts. So this is our fantastic caregiver panel. And we're going to be talking about the things that came up today in the various talks that we heard about the medical issues related to LGS. And we're going to be talking about diagnosis, we're going to be talking about treatment, we're going to be talking about management, and we're going to be talking about it across the lifespan. And I just want to start off by saying, for those of you that are in here that are new to the LGS journey, it is overwhelming. In the beginning, it's utter chaos, and you spend all your time trying to figure out what it is and how to stop it. And then somewhere in the LGS journey, maybe around a 7 or 8 or 9-year-old, around there, there's no hard number, you start to wonder how you're going to live the rest of your life with this. It's very overwhelming. And I just want to say again that many of us who have older kids are here fighting for a better future for you or pushing for a better future for you. Thank you, Cannon. Thank you. That's Can, right? I can't quite, it's like I'm blinded over here. So you know, if you're feeling overwhelmed, I've been there, done that. I think we've all shed many, many tears, and you're going to hear from some amazing advocates here. But we're really here to support you. Cry away, leave if you need to, and come back. Take it in your own stride. But we are here for you if you ever want to talk to somebody. So here is our amazing panel. We have, yes, oh, this is very exciting. So we have Darla Davison over here. She's from New York. She is mom to Aaron. You're going to be hearing a little bit more from her in just a minute. I'm introducing you guys for yourselves. We also have Colleen Gagnon. She's mom to Neve. Neve. It's spelled Niamh. Apparently it's Gaelic. Neve. And I'm going to keep working on that one. And she is from, where did you tell me you're from? Boston. She's from Boston. Yes, all right. We have Brittany Brown. Brittany is from Michigan, right? Michigan? Yeah. Yes, and she's Amari's mom, and Amari's running around here somewhere, kicking her little feet up. We also have Charles Wagner, who you guys all learned from this morning, and Charles Jr. And then, of course, Jackie Villatoro is mom to Devin. And when we start talking, you guys can tell a little bit more about your kiddos and their age. But I wanted to just ask a few questions first off. So thinking about the very early years of your LGS loved one, how many of your kids started seizing in the first year of life? Raise your hand. So 3. How many started seizing between the age of 2 and 4? Both. Okay, so these are the most common ages, although there are these cases where the kids don't start seizing till later. But this is the most common scenario. How many of your kiddos had infantile spasms? 2, 3. So about 30% of LGS, so about, if you take infantile spasms kids, about 30% evolve into LGS. But if you count how many had LGS in our group, it's usually about half. So we have an enrichment there. How many of you guys got the diagnosis between the age of 3 and 5? Raise your hand. 2. What age was it for you, Charles?
So seizures at 18, and by 2, we had the LGS. So
had the LGS diagnosis. Yeah. So about, just to talk about progress, but about 1.5 years ago, I was at a meeting where the doctors, all the experts were together with the FDA saying it was impossible to diagnose LGS under the age of 2. And we're meeting a lot of families now who are getting the diagnosis earlier, which is fantastic. How about you guys? How about you, Darla?
Ours was ridiculous. Our son was 18 when we were finally clearly told that he had LGS.
Wow. Yeah. And that happens a lot as well, where you didn't get the diagnosis. And we're seeing this a lot in the genetic space where the doctors will say, oh, your child has SCN2A epilepsy or you know, CDKL5 deficiency disorder. And it's like, well, do they have LGS or not, right? Because you can have both. And you can get services based on LGS. So I think that's important, but that happens a lot too. What about you guys, Colleen?
Yeah, I would say it was the same thing. She was diagnosed with a DCX subcortical band heterotopia, which is like a cortical malformation. We found out at 9 months. But because she had a diagnosis of a genetic thing, we just called it refractory epilepsy. And we didn't really get an LGS diagnosis until I would say about the age of 10. because that's when her seizures actually got worse. She did very well for several years, and then her seizures really didn't expand until the age of 10 and got progressively worse. And I think it was really diagnosed based on getting coverage for a drug. You know,
Gotcha.
because I feel like our center always gave a more specific diagnosis. So we didn't really use the term LGS very much, which is interesting. And now I feel like they're starting to do it again because it also matters in terms of getting specific treatment.
Yeah.
So.
What we call it does matter. And I
Right.
think for a long time, if you had bad epilepsy and you didn't have Dravet, and those were the only two known syndromes, you got put into one or the other. And then there was a whole 20-year period where you just got called intractable epilepsy or refractory epilepsy. But now that we're starting to look more into the science, I think it's really important to look at LGS as the network disease if we're going to start looking at possible treatments for that. But in addition to that, getting access to medicine. If you want access to Fintepla, it's approved for Dravet and LGS, and so I think it's important for a lot of those reasons. And he agrees, it's perfect. So Jackie, you started talking a little bit about your journey, but tell us about Yes, Jackie, we're going to start with you. Tell us about Devin, tell us how old he is, and we want to specifically hear from you about the diagnostic odyssey that you've been on and how you finally found your way to seizures, then LGS, and then...
Yep. So my son Devin is 10 years old, and so I said to Tracy, we've been on this journey for a decade now. He was diagnosed with infantile spasms at 4 months of age. And right after he was diagnosed, we went through all the MRIs, and there was no brain malformation or any cause there, so we went down the genetics route. And so he was diagnosed in 2012 with infantile spasms. So I wrote down all of the tests, Tracy, and the years. So 2013, we did an SCN1A genetic test that was negative, a comprehensive epilepsy panel, and a microarray, all negative. 2015, we did whole exome sequencing, negative. 2017, we reanalyzed it, negative. 2019, we did the metabolomics, which Dr. Porter was talking about before, VLCFA, a lysosomal enzyme analysis, all negative. We did an oligonucleotide, an SNP microarray, and a GeneDx autism panel, all negative. Then in 2020, we went to CHOP to do whole genome sequencing. That came out negative. And in 2021, usually every 2 years, I was going to be like, all right, let's get it reanalyzed again, let's see if anything is there. In 2021, they reanalyzed the whole genome, and they did find something. But Dr. Porter alluded to something earlier when she said that the labs will relook at the data, but they don't always notify you of the result, and that's what happened. 2022, we went back to CHOP and was asking them to reanalyze the whole genome, and they were like, in 2021, the lab reported this finding, but we didn't really think anything of it. So they looked into it again, and then now we have this, it's actually a repeat expansion. So then we've started down this road of, none of these other tests that we've done over the last decade looked at repeat expansions, or the repeat was so small it wasn't picked up by the microarray. So I wanted to let Tracy and the foundation know that, because if some of you are on this genetic journey and you're like, oh, well, it came up negative and I don't know what to do next, all I can say is just keep looking at it. Every couple of years, the science keeps getting better. You don't know what the next test is going to show. So keep reanalyzing it, and then keep going to these big centers that have some of this more advanced technology, because they can start doing these deeper dives. So now we have something that, okay, then now that's another thing, yes, that we have to go and make more appointments and see, all right, well, what does this new gene expansion tell us now? But at least it's something that, maybe we can do something about.
Right. I mean, on the one hand, it's like, oh, great, thank you for yet another diagnosis, right? But then on the other hand, it opens up the possibility of gene therapy or targeted precision treatments to your gene, in addition to the LGS medicines that are out there. So that's a big deal. So there's this Mother's Day card where it's like, hey, Mom, I got some people to help you out. And there's 20 people on the lawn, and it's like a chef and a barber and a cook, and right? And it's like all the jobs Mom does, right? Like a nurse. So you need to add gene hunter.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know what that
Yeah.
person looks like, but I hope they have a spear or something like that. But no, I think if you're passive in this space, you know you want to keep pushing for an answer. And of course, we don't have the time or energy to do it, but we do it anyway because we love our kids. So what about you, Darla? What was the diagnostic? I mean, obviously, it took you a long time to get the LGS journey, but
Yes.
did you ever find out your cause or your etiology?
No, they did mention that the SCN1A, but then tag that with, but we're not sure that that's the cause.
So it's like a
That's pretty much
variant of
like that.
unknown significance, a
Yes.
VUS. Yes, and genetics is moving so fast. Having just spent 3 years in a genetic postdoc, and then now 10 years later, it's just crazy. And the specialist like Dr. Nupp actually recommends a reanalysis every 2 years on your genetics if you don't have an answer. And so there's definitely three groups here. The Rare Genomes Project is here, and so is LabCorp and Variant X. So if you do have questions about whether genetic testing is right for you, we brought them right to you guys so you could talk to them and about how to get that kind of thing covered. But it's really important to know your cause. Even if you don't have a genetic, if there was some sort of acquired form of epilepsy, they're starting to do genetics on these families too, right? Like a number one cause of LGS or seizures that evolve into LGS is lack of oxygen at birth. And not every baby with lack of oxygen at birth develops seizures, and not every baby with seizures develops LGS, and there's a reason for that, and so they're starting to look. So science is coming along, but
Yeah, I would mention, even at Boston Children's, are doing major research on most of the cases of CP have been found to now be genetic. Dr. Sid Srivastava. So it's really, truly like the Walsh Center. We're finding more and more that the underlying cause where you thought it was just related to birth or congenital problems are turning out more and more to be genetic as well. So.
Now, have any of you guys, do any of you guys not live near a major center and have had to like travel or use miracle flights to get a second opinion or find a way to get to a specialist, or are they just all in your backyard? Anybody?
We traveled to CHOP.
You have to travel to CHOP, so you're living about how far away from?
We live on Long Island, so to try to get off Long Island into Philly.
Into Philly, right,
So
right.
it could be 5 hours, and then with an LGS child, that could be 6, 7.
Yes. I mean, I think the recommendation that I hear across the board is that if you have an LGS loved one, you want to get them in to see a pediatric epileptologist at least once. And there are, like I said, miracle flights or other groups that will help you to get there to get a second opinion. But for them to really weigh in and use this advanced tech to get you guys there, and the foundation can kind of help you understand that a little bit more. So just let us know if you need that. So diagnosis, I feel like by the time you get to LGS, it's like you've been through it already, right? And so when you come in, it's not like, oh, this is what epilepsy is, this is what seizures are. You're just like, all right, great, another diagnosis, thank you. Let's talk about the treatment odyssey. And I don't just want to focus on the early years on this because I feel like treatment is across the board for all of us, right? I feel like we're all in the same treatment loop. But let's talk a little bit about the treatment odyssey. So Brittany, tell us a little bit about Amari, about how old she is. And she's got a lot going on in addition to seizures. So how do you navigate her treatment journey? How do you manage it? How do you deal with it?
I'm a very good organizer, so that's Amari talking in the background. Amari will be 13 in August, and we've been through a lot. She had a lot of complications from her medications, so we've had the corpus callosotomy, we had the VNS. Just recently, she got the deep brain stimulator put in February. Her esophagus is not connected to her stomach because she had a reaction and she was having a lot of GERD and acid reflux. So we had that surgery. She has a G-tube, a Metaport. If you look underneath her chin, we've had her salivary glands taken out just because she was choking so much every single night on her saliva. And then she had surgery for ileus, for a lazy bowel. So we've been through the ringer. She's in a wheelchair. She has cerebral palsy, and it's just been an adventure.
So how are you saying all of this with a smile?
You get to a point where it's like you just accept it. You just roll with it. In the beginning, it's like you're crying, you're depressed. I remember it was times I used to have a wine holder in my shower, and that was like where I would cry. Just in that small little short period that I can leave her. But you get to a point where it's like, you know what? Okay, it's another hospital visit. It's another cough. Okay, I know how to deal with this. And you just deal with it.
Brittany has a beautiful video that's on the LGS Foundation homepage of her and Amari, and it's just so impactful to see how you guys have bounced back. And I think my favorite line from that is, you know, I thought she was gonna dance and, you know, be all dressed up, and then you're like, and she does all that. She just does it her way.
Different way, yes.
Darla, you guys have a pretty long treatment odyssey that ends really interestingly. Tell us how old Aaron is, and tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah. My son Aaron is now 33, and similar to Tracy, he was 2.5 and developing typically, and had his first seizure. We didn't, again, know what it was either, for sure. And so, and then looking at getting our LGS diagnosis at 18, that whole gap of years was hospitals, ERs, and trying and failing many medications, trying different hospitals or institutions for treatment. So it was a long trek of trying and failing. And you know, one thing I thought of today is, I don't know about you, but when it comes to learning about a new medication, it's like, okay, here's something new we can try. You know, how do you feel about that? For me, it's a balancing act, because I have the hopeful side, you know, that maybe this is the one. Maybe this is going to be the one. And so you have that hope. And it's good to have that hope. And then there's also, okay, this could be bad. We've all had those experiences as well. You know, but I would encourage you, you know, just to stay hopeful and keep that hope, because things are changing. And for us, we saw that hope realized when Aaron was in his mid-20s, and we heard about a new medicine coming out. And we were willing to drive 7 hours across the state of New York to get in a trial, and that has changed our son's life. And so it was a lot of years and a lot of valleys that we went through, but to reach just a wonderful place of hope, to see his life change and to see him be a new kid.
So what does life look like for him now? How did it change after you found this medicine? But you can mention if you want, because I know everyone's dying to know.
Okay. Well, we were in on the Epidiolex trial, and we also switched some of his other pharma meds around at that time. And so he has a new personality. He was kind of a quiet, one word, a little bit shy, and now he's very social. And talkative and active. And so we have friends tell us all the time, it's like, wow, Aaron came up to me and asked me how my back was doing, because he'd heard, you know, there was a problem there. So his life has changed a lot. And it's given, of course, obviously it's changed our lives a lot. Being able to give him more space, a little more freedom and independence. So it's wonderful.
That's what it's about, the independence. You know, when we started in this space, and we you know, it's like the first 1 or 2 medications for epilepsy in general and LGS are chosen, you know, pretty realistically, right? Like they're chosen with some data backing them. And then you enter into what Karen Groff affectionately calls the dartboard approach to treating LGS, where it's just like, this medicine seems good, this one seems good. Yeah. And so we really do need to fund research on which are the best treatments now and learn from every patient. But I learned something about a year and a half ago going to a science meeting. So I learn stuff at science meetings all the time that they never tell us, right? And so it's like, I don't know, we're not in on the secret handshake or something, but I'm wondering if you guys knew this. So the FDA has run a bunch of clinical trials in epilepsy in general. And they used to be very long. They used to be weeks and weeks long. And they have now shortened them because if you are in the placebo, right, he agrees. If you're in the placebo arm of a clinical trial, where your medicines are not being changed at all, you're still having tons of seizures, you are more at risk of SUDEP.
Oh.
Raise your hand if you knew that. Anybody here knew that? Say, oh, that person, ooh, you give that guy a gold star. Anybody else know it? Yeah, so I learned this about a year and a half ago. I try to tell everybody, now I've just told all of you, but we entered a whole period where we didn't change anything because we were just so depressed. It's like, the chance of responding is less than 1%, and I know it's not 0, but the doctor's already given up. And so now knowing that, but I'm glad I'm not the only one that knew that. But it is important to keep, pushing and trying to find that thing. And I do think, if you look at the scientific papers, back in, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they used to say 95% of children and adults with LGS, well, just children, because they didn't believe in that children with LGS grew into adults. It's like all of a sudden they just disappeared at the age of 18. But children with LGS, 95% continued to have seizures into adulthood. And that number is now 85%. And so I think these medicines and these new treatments are making a dent. It's just not making a dent in the majority, and it's not making our kids seizure-free. It'll attack like one type of seizure. So we have a lot of work to do, but I think progress is being made. I want to talk a little bit about management, and of course all these things, diagnosis, treatment, and management, are going to come again in this, but I do want to talk a little bit about managing all of the medical aspects of this, right? And we saw from our survey for families that seizures and safety were a big thing. So Colleen, can you talk to us about the issues that arise at home? I mean, first of all, tell us a little bit about you, your family, and tell us a little bit about how old your kiddo is. Talk about the seizure types, and how do you keep the house a safe place? How do you have issues with status and clusters like Dr. Ches talked about, and do you use rescues, and how do you sort of manage to all that?
Sure, not an easy question, but I know it's on the minds of us all. My daughter is now 14. She was diagnosed at 9 months with a DCX, a brain malformation, so it's a genetic brain malformation. It was de novo, and meaning, it's not carried down, it was just something that happened. And it's rare. It's generally only in females, and it's fairly rare. So when we got the information, I graduated as a nurse, a pediatric nurse in 1996. And so I was already a nurse, and my husband as well, as also a medical professional. And you think you know a lot. My background was in PD oncology and general peds. It was not specifically in the span of neurology. And I'm going to fully admit that I didn't even like neurology. And I had actually been offered a job as a traveling nurse at Boston Children's to work on the neurology floor, and I was like, I don't really like it. I was 25, and I was like, it's too sad. I don't like it. I'd rather work with oncology.
Wow. Wow.
That was before my daughter was born.
Wow.
So anyway, but I had kept connections there. I went across the street. I ended up leaving pediatrics, went across the street to the hospital across the street and became a labor and delivery nurse. And I consequently helped deliver several babies of some people that I had worked with over at BCH. So it's an unusual connection, but I helped her deliver. And when my daughter was first diagnosed, I reached out. I emailed and I said, I don't know if you remember me, but I used to work there as a nurse, and then I actually was your labor and delivery nurse. I had curly hair. I usually say I have really curly hair. And they usually go, oh, she's like, I totally remember you. Why don't you come here? And, because I just wanted second opinions. I was in that state, but I really didn't know about seizures, like you would expect. Just because I was a nurse, I always tell people, learning as a nurse and then seeing your own child have a seizure. You know, you're used to seeing it in Hollywood or used to seeing a specific type. So I was really caught off guard because her very first seizure, she was 9 months old, and I wasn't anticipating anything, and she just went limp. So she became limp and cyanotic, and she didn't seize. So I honestly thought my daughter died in my arms that day. And me and my husband were running around. You would think that we were not medical professionals. And I was like, wait a second, call 911, you know? And by the time the EMS arrived, then she started to have tonic-clonic seizures. But I said, I didn't even know that this was a type of seizure, you know? And then fast forward, just when you think you know your child, so she did kind of have a honeymoon period after diagnosis. She went on phenobarbital and maybe Depakote, I believe, and we did really well for several years. And then there was, you know, maybe every 2 years it would like cycle, and she would have one seizure type, and then something else would happen. And I think the neurologists were almost annoyed with us because I think they felt I was very observant because of my background. But I would always say I'm not a neurology expert.
You don't even like neurology.
I don't even like neurology.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I'm not even, are you kidding? I don't even like neurology. And, but I wanted to stay on top of it because I still had that belief that I'm gonna do everything I can to minimize the impact of seizure activity. And we did really well. And she was actually only on one drug until the age of 10. And I'll fast forward that I took the job. They were looking for a nurse leader, and they happened to be, and I reached out to the same nurse director that I helped deliver her baby. And they had a job in leadership at Boston Children's as a nurse manager. And I was like, ooh, I don't know if that's the right place for me to work. But my husband really wanted to move to Massachusetts. We have a lot of family, so I said, okay, I'll go. And I did it, and of course, her epilepsy really exploded after the age of 10.
At the age of 10.
And I never had to rescue her.
Was that like a puberty kind of thing? Was she puberty coming on, or not
I
quite
think
yet,
so,
or-
yeah. I mean, her
So she
puberty.
started needing rescues at that point.
Yeah, I had never had to rescue her until I
Wow.
became the nurse manager at the epilepsy center. And I swear it was like, oh, this is embarrassing, you know. But I honestly, her seizures really changed in that after the age of 10, and she actually developed infantile it wasn't infantile spasms, you would call it epileptic, but she had hypsarrhythmia and spasms.
Oh, wow, yeah, that's
after
not
the
good
age of
intent.
9, yeah. So she went on vigabatrin, and you know, so she has not followed the general course, and you know.
How's she doing now? Is she still getting rescues regularly, or were you guys able to nip? No.
No.
About how often?
I would say at least once a week.
How did you learn about rescues?
I really learned a lot on the fly, I would say, at work.
Did you learn it? You learned it from nursing.
Yeah,
right?
I learned it sort of from where I work. So
From
I
your
think I
work.
had a good vision as opposed to most of you. But we used to, you know, draw up Versed in vials and teach people, and then you used to have to like put on a nasal atomizer. So we used to teach that. That was like a big thing, and it was really cheap. It was actually only $10.
I'm kind of curious how everybody learned. You like made me want to ask
Yeah.
this question. How did everybody else learn about rescues? Darla, how did you learn about rescue vets at home? Rescue vets
We learned probably at a conference. And,
at a like an LGS
Yes.
conference or something like that. What about you guys, Brittany?
In school.
Where?
In school.
In school.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay, Charles, about you guys.
Our physician team.
Your physician team.
Yeah.
Wow.
Physician team.
was
This
the
is
same for
great.
me,
Physician
too.
team.
Yeah.
Okay, this is great. So we used to go to the ER. Now, mind you, we existed pre-Diastat. Diastat was approved like 22 years ago. But we used to go to the ER like weekly to get intravenous Ativan. And I went to an Epilepsy Foundation conference, and I was riding home to the airport in the cab with a sales rep for Diastat. And I'm telling her about my daughter. She's like, I think you need Diastat. And I'm like, I don't really know. I was so tired. Okay. And she just grabbed me by the arms, and she's like, talk to your doctor about Diastat. Now, how many of you guys know that there are different kinds? There's rectal and there's nasal.
Oh,
You
yeah.
guys
Yeah.
knew that.
Yeah.
How many of you guys in the audience didn't know there were nasal rescues until today? Raise your hand. Couple hands in here. Yeah, I see about 7 or 8 hands. You just knew about the rectal. How many of you guys didn't know about rescues at all until today? Anybody? At-home rescues? I might see a hand in the back. I can't call it, so it's I'm being interrogated by this light here. But yeah, no, and I think it's really important for us to be sharing this information because there have been 2 papers that have come out recently. The first one was about rescue meds. They both had the same conclusion. The second one was about brain surgery. And you could actually apply this to SUDEP as well. But when the conversation happens or the referral for brain surgery happens, it's usually caregiver or patient referred. Mm-hmm. So I love that your care teams are telling you guys about that. I think that means that there's progress.
One thing
I want to, oh, go ahead.
No, one thing I was going to say about rescues too, I have this conversation with our doctor, I don't know about you guys, but they'll say like, all right, well, you're going to give this rescue after 5 minutes. Right. And for me, I always said to, to my husband and our nurses, like, I'm not going to wait 5 minutes of him seizing because I know it's not going to stop before 5 minutes. So I'm just going to give it when it starts.
When you know it's not going to end is the time to give it,
like
right?
I'm not going to wait until it goes that long.
Yeah,
so I would also say, ask that question to your doctor too. Like, don't just assume that if they're telling you it's, going to wait 5 minutes and then give it, or 3 minutes or 10 minutes. Have the conversation about your child's types of seizures and how long do you really want to wait?
Really need to wait if you know it's not going to end. No, I know, I mean, for us, it was like 5 minutes for a convulsive seizures. And it's like, well, she doesn't go into convulsive status. Her seizure, her status was always started as a tonic or a tonic-clonic. And then it would taper into an atypical absence where she twitched. And then this could go on for days. So they've termed that recently a sequential seizure where the seizure sort of morphs from one to the other. But that was always ours. And then now there's this talk of cluster seizures, right? And what we were talking about this on the online LGS Foundation Caregiver Private Support Group. And it was like 2 tonic-clonics in a 24-hour period. Was that what it was? It was something like that. And it was like, gosh, 2 tonic-clonics in a 24-hour period. We're giving rescues every single day.
I know. Yeah.
Right.
And that's the thing is, not only does your child change over time, because you'll notice that the seizure types change, maybe the type of seizure. You may get one controlled with the med, but not another controlled with the med. So there's a lot of that. So I noticed that I would even hesitate, like, well, do I need to rescue? Do I not need to rescue? No. It's really complicated in LGS. It's not an easy answer because, what are the types of seizures? And you said this before, like, what are the ones that you're the most concerned about? Obviously, tonic-clonic or tonic are the types that predispose them to SUDEP. We've gotten to the point where her seizures have gotten so bad that we're really focusing on the ones that are the most detrimental, right? It's a hard road to go down, but I think it's such a nuanced conversation that you have to have with your doctor.
Have the rescue. Yeah. I mean, so, like I wish we had rescued more in the beginning because we were told a lot, oh, she's just, people with LGS just seize, right? But I wish we had rescued more in the beginning. But then you also have to worry about the rescue, them needing more and more and more of it, right? Because these are benzos or them just stopping working at all. And so it's very individual. I want to give Charles a chance to talk since he's just sitting there so patiently and quietly as the gentleman on our panel. Charles Jr. Was really struggled with drop atonic seizures. And those are just, I mean, I don't know if they all suck, but those are just so dangerous. Can you tell us a little bit more about, how, I mean, we know we heard from you this morning, but just about Charles.
Yeah, so, as his seizures evolved, they originally started with, my wife was changing him on at about 18 months. He was on changing his diaper, and all of a sudden his arm just kind of stiffened, and it looked like he was pointing at something. So maybe we thought, was it seeing something, whatever was going on. But as it continued to progress, he would go into these full body drop seizures, and we held. Well, it was a while before we finally decided it was time to get the helmet on him because you just never knew when they were going to, and he hated the helmet. He didn't want to have that thing on. And then we had one brain surgery that we thought was a frontal lobe surgery that we hoped would help take care of actually they gave us a 70% chance that it was going to solve they saw something in his brain up there that was going to take the seizures away. And of course, the minute he was out and into ICU, he had a seizure. So we knew, of course, that didn't take care of it. And we waited. We were terrified after that first surgery. We waited years. So we go to Columbus Nationwide Children's, and he had been trying to convince us for years to get the CC, and we just didn't. We just put it off, but his drop seizures continued to get so bad. He hit the back of his head, even with his helmet on, and the back of a bar stool. And I came in there because I literally just turned my back, and he's laying on the floor in a pool of blood, and I'm having a heart attack, you know. Cut his eye, had to have stitches in his ear. So we went and did that, and for us, that has been transformational. We just did that, in October, I think, of this last year. We did the laser ablation one. I think he's kid 18 or 19 at Nationwide Children's that did that. And it has been life-changing. We've gone from, we can have 10 or more drop seizures a day. We might see one every couple of 2 or 3 days, or it could go a week, and it's even helped some of his other seizures. So that surgery, it's a palliative, right? It doesn't stop him, but it'll also allow, instead of having full body, it might be a partial one. And the first couple of times it happened to him, he was terrified. He knew something was happening, but he couldn't figure out what it was, because this part of his body, he could still move, and this part was completely immobile. Yeah, he'll still occasionally have a full one. He'll hit the ground fast, but if your doctor is recommending that CC for drop seizures, at least for our kid, it was transformational for us. And we think he's gotten really vocal since that that seizure. And since that, and he's definitely more emotional. He would never cry. I mean, if he cried, there was something wrong. I mean, and a handful of times in the years, and now he can get very emotional because he's aware. We think he's gotten more aware because his brain is maybe not fully rebooting every time. He's getting very independent. Anyway, from that point of view, that surgery has been very phenomenal.
Brittany, you guys are in the hospital and the ER a lot. How do you manage that? I mean, I hear people say like, oh, okay, you need like your ER go bag and it should have your seizure action plan in there and your list of meds. And then you guys end up at the hospital and you're like, just read the seizure action plan and the list of meds, like, so you don't have to tell it to every doctor. You spend a lot of time there. What is your advice to families that are spending a lot of time in the ER or in the hospital, apart from try not to ever go there?
I would say always have a digital copy and a physical copy of your medications, because that's usually the first thing that they'll ask for. I also have an emergency bag. I call it my mommy bag, similar to when you're pregnant. I have that bag. But I would just say, you just always know, and it's just better to be prepared. I have my extension cord with my phone charger. That's like my thing. I don't care what else is in there. I can get it later, but you always want your phone charger just so you can communicate to everyone. But we spend a lot of time in the hospital. She's a little celebrity. I kind of like call ahead now. So once you get in good with your hospital, you can call ahead and say, you know, here comes Amari. She's coming in, and they're kind of like prepared for you. Now we kind of like skip the emergency room and go straight up to ICU most times, because that's usually, when I bring her in, it's usually something that's like, okay, it's ICU. It's not the regular floor. It's usually not emergency. It's just straight there. So just having that relationship with your emergency team or your medical team. I have all of our doctors' numbers on speed dial. I don't use them as frequently anymore, but yeah, just having that open communication with them, so you get to kind of like skip the line.
Yeah, I would say that that preparedness also gives you a sense of, it allows you to be a little calmer because it can be terrifying seeing what's going on with your child. Even, I mean, we're 8 years into this, and when we have to call the squad to get him in, because, you know, he just is not coming out of the seizure, just having all of that and being prepared, it's just one less thing you have to kind of worry about, right? And allows you to focus on the child at that moment, so that preparedness is critical.
Darla, you have been counting seizures now for about 30 years or so. So do you use a seizure diary? Have you had a seizure action plan, you know, or any devices even? And then maybe like how that's changed over the years?
Well, 30 years ago, we did have paper and pencil, and so that's what I was
Not a
starting
rock
with.
on it. No, okay, just kidding.
And then at some point I translated that to a spreadsheet. This was before even seizure trackers had come along. The best thing that happened for us, because our son's seizures are all in his sleep, which is a blessing, but there wasn't, if there wasn't sound to wake us up with a baby monitor, we were missing things. And so when we took the step several years ago to acquire a SAMI camera, now the routine is I get up every morning, and with my breakfast I go through anywhere from 80 to 100 video clips. And I pick out the seizures that I didn't hear, would not know that he had, and I feel like I'm getting an excellent picture of what his nights are like. That also includes getting up to go to the bathroom and coming back to his room, and he's shining the flashlight around, and the cat moseys in and he gives treats. I get to find out all these things that go on in the night, so. Yeah.
Interesting.
We
What about you
recently-
guys?
We recently got the SAMI device too. All these years that we always had a pulse ox, and so I always thought that was good enough. And it was only recently, like I think in December, hospital visit, that neurologist said to me, that's really not good enough. Like, you should, based on the types of seizures he's having and risk of SUDEP, like you need to look into alternative monitoring devices. And so we got the SAMI through the Danny Did Foundation, and the LGS Foundation helped as well. And I couldn't recommend it enough to anybody who asks, even on the Facebook page. I'm always making a plug because it's, like Darla said, it's really been super helpful. You can change the sensitivity and everything.
So
It's
since
good to train others too. They can, because when your child has so many different types of seizures, you can go back and show people what they all look like.
Yes.
Right. So since you brought up the S word, SUDEP, let's just have a little chat about that. So how did you first hear about SUDEP?
So, I had probably heard about it through a conference or through reading about LGS and seizures. But, like others, our neurologist hadn't mentioned it. I think sometimes, especially if you have a neurologist where you have a close relationship, I don't know if they just didn't want to upset us or it was too emotional a topic. And so it was one of the times where we actually raised it. I raised it. And then we had a conversation about it.
What was your first thought when you heard about it? Your
fear.
first thoughts?
Fear. Yeah. I mean, how could you not be fearful?
So
I'm
what did
afraid to get up every morning and walk in there. And
What's that?
I said I'm afraid to get up every morning and walk in there and terrified.
How many of you guys, raise your hands, put your hand on your kid multiple times a night to see if they're still breathing?
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah. Same.
sometimes
Still.
a quiet monitor can be
Yes.
scarier than one
Yeah.
where you hear them.
Yeah. How did you overcome that fear, or at least still get out of bed and put pants on after that, right?
I don't know. I guess just going into action mode to see what I can do to be as I don't know if it's preventive or is the right word, but
Just get educated
Protected.
and
Yeah.
empowered, do what you
Yeah.
can, find out as much
Exactly.
as you can about it.
exactly. So and because I always thought I had heard about the SAMI and all these other devices before, and honestly, I thought like, well, I have the pulse ox, like that should be good enough. And for them to be like, yeah, no, it's really not. You need to do something else. It's like, okay. It was kind of like knocks you down a peg, I guess.
Right. How many of you guys use devices? I know you guys both do the SAMI. Do you guys use devices at all, Charles, Brittany?
So we have a baby, we don't have the device they have. We have a baby monitor that's turned up full, and the type of seizures he has, you know, if he's waking up, I'll hear him and then go in and check on him, but I'll have to look into the other one. I mean, the only other, you know, I'm feeling pretty horrible at this point, to be honest, because we did, for the longest time, we tracked every seizure. Now we just kind of keep a highlight of the drops. But my daily log right now is his bowel movements, because, you know, he can go, you know, get all bound up, not peeing enough, not drinking.
Sure.
And that, you know, that's the thing. It was like, we've been to the emergency room 3 times for just, you know, all of a sudden just get all backed up. I guess it's a thing for our kiddos having that type of problem. So I'm feeling a little intimidated that I'm not tracking all of the seizures every day. That you
Listen,
Tracking the
I'm
bowel
I'm an
movements are just as
epilepsy nurse, and I'm not tracking my own seizures. So,
Right.
it just, to me, it gets daunting, and I really struggle with being empowered and being safe, but also focusing on quality of life. I go back and forth on, you know, is being afraid every day and, you know, sort of lamenting or trying to control every detail really the right thing, or is that really going to be helpful? And I really go back and forth. We ended up getting a seizure, we have a seizure alert dog, but he's actually a multi-purpose service animal, and we got him in Ohio, and we raised money and got him, and he is trained to bark when she has seizures. So he can't really detect a seizure, so to speak. You know, if you really worked hard enough, some dogs are able to do that, but he's really effective at barking when she's having, and so we had to choose like which type of seizure we wanted him to bark, and so, you know, and you train him by like everybody like has that type of motion that she would have, and he barks. And I will tell you that, you know, we've only had him for a couple of years, but if she was up in her room, all of a sudden you hear the dog bark because he doesn't bark otherwise, and it's like vroom, and you just run up there, and he has been effective. Now, are there times that we miss something? Maybe, right? But I don't know. I don't know if it's worth it to lament on those things. It's
the dog device. It's the doggy device. We did try to get the service dogs here at the conference, but we weren't able to. But I want to keep talking, but I did want to open it up for questions. If you have questions, put your hands in the air for any of our panel, and the mics will come around. But Charles, go ahead.
I have one piece of advice, especially for those of you that have kids that are mobile. One of the life-saving or changing for me, because the first 4 years I slept with Charles after, because the seizure would wake him up. He gets up in the middle of the night. From there, he can have another seizure, he can fall, he can do whatever. Those safety beds out there that they're on display are life-saving. They can go in. He loves his safety sleeper. He'll crawl in there, you zip him in there, he feels very cozy. He cannot get out of that thing. I can sleep. So those things are, again, life-changing, and they love them. It'll give you some peace of mind.
Tracy, we've got a question right here.
Great, we got a question right there.
This question is for Jackie. We sat together for lunch today, and I just wanted to see if you would echo some of the advice you gave for new families, since we have so many here. What would you tell them the best advice you have been given or have followed through this journey to be more successful?
Yeah.
You should be moderating, because I was just about to go down the line and ask. Get your butt up here and take us over, girl.
So remind me if I missed something that I said this afternoon. But so one of the things that was super helpful for us in the beginning was we had, and I've mentioned this to physicians in the past, we were lucky enough that there was an awesome social worker who was in the neurology department. And so when we were first diagnosed with infantile spasms, you know, she took us aside and was like, okay, you're gonna, you're gonna apply for these things, you're gonna start getting, here's the thing for early intervention, here's how you're gonna get a visiting nurse service. And at first it was overwhelming, but at least it helped me feel like I was doing something. Like I needed to feel like I was doing something to make his life a little bit better. And if that something was, getting early intervention services in the house and getting therapies, even if, at this point, it took him years to sit up on his own, to eventually walk. He's ambulatory, he walks now. That took forever. And so even if you feel like the services aren't really doing anything, it's doing something. And it's also giving them that social piece. So for me, it was really helpful and empowering to make me feel like I was doing something and making somewhat of a difference, and not feeling powerless and just watching things fade away, watching skills fade away. What else did I miss?
What about you, Charles? Advice for the newly diagnosed?
So, I'll build off a little bit, and I can't take credit for this. My wife did this. She is an advocate for our son in understanding each state is different. We've moved a couple times because of my job, understanding what's available. And in the school system especially, she researched all that, went to bat where the school sends Charles to school all summer because he does not do well. If you pull him out of his routine, he starts to regress. So being that advocate, understanding, and that's, again, it's a long journey to kind of get through the process. But we're finally now starting to get some of the services that he has. So nobody's going to do it but you.
But you. Tomorrow, so today was really focusing on seizures, safety, and the medical aspects of LGS and research. Tomorrow is all about LGS-associated disorders, so GI, constipation, colon, and then Sunday we'll be talking about school and community and really starting our efforts. Brittany, advice for new families?
So I would say take that time. So you always hear there's a calm before the storm. Always take that time, that calm, whether it's an hour, whether it's a day, do something for yourself. Be selfish because you're spending so much time with your child. You're doing everything for them. But if you have that hour to yourself to watch Real Housewives or to drink a glass of wine, take that time and be selfish because you never know that next moment where you're in a hospital and you don't have that time and you're stressing out. So yeah, just take that time, the calm before the storm.
Colleen, advice for new families?
This is a hard one, but I usually say in a different way, try to be patient. And it's very hard because you're always advocating and you're always tracking and you're always looking at all the details and you know your child the best and everybody knows that. But at the same time, sometimes you're your own worst enemy because you don't give something the right time to see if it works. Like, have hope. Try that new drug. Maybe number 27 is going to work. And don't look at every single thing. Like, I think with LGS, you do have to see trends. You really have to give it a good 4 to 6 weeks to really understand the impact because the disease is so variable itself. So I just always try to tell people, and if something really doesn't work, guess what? You can stop it. You can go off of it. Because I held myself from really giving her a medication because I was so worried about it. And somebody said, you can just stop it. I'm like, yeah. But it took somebody actually saying that to me because I thought too much about it. So I just say, be patient in a different way and give everything a chance and just always keep a little bit of hope. Don't always try to look for the wrong because sometimes you'll miss out on the right. And then definitely keep a sense of humor because there's no way to go through your life without sometimes just laughing about something because
otherwise you'll cry.
Otherwise you'll cry, right? So, if my daughter's on a behavior plan to stop twerking at school, then that's okay, Everybody else has different rewards, but, I actually think that was kind of funny. And, maybe most kids wouldn't champion that with their kid, but you know what? it's okay. And that's her. And, you know, we laugh about it and it's fun. And hey, if she's happy, I'm happy.
There you go.
Yeah.
I want you to go last, but I want you to hold off on a second because we
Okay.
have 2 questions from our virtual audience. And boy, they went for the jugular with these ones. All right. So we really struggle when to use a rescue for our daughter. Her current rescue med is an extra dose of Keppra. So if she's seizing right before her next dose is due, we don't want to give her 2 doses. And I mean, I know the standard answer is go talk to your doctor, but like how many of you guys struggle with when to give a rescue?
Yeah.
Every time, right? Like when is she, oh, Brittany, you don't. Oh, okay.
We haven't had to give a rescue in years.
In years, okay.
Because
She
she's had
hasn't
a lot
had to
of the
give a
brain
rescue in years. That's
surgery.
perfect.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a struggle, you know, when is the seizure doing brain damage? When is it not okay? But also,
to be zonked out for the rest of the day because
Right.
maybe you have something you want to go to or do.
I know. I mean, I tell doctors all the time that we could probably stop all of Savannah's seizures if we put her into a coma, and we have put her into a medically induced coma, but there's no quality of life there. So finding that balance, I think, is really, really hard. The next question here is, I want to know who on the panel has a DNR, a do not resuscitate. And the question is asked because this person doesn't want their son to have worse pain than he has right now if they were to bring him back if he passed away.
So,
You have a DNR.
so yes and no. We had one, and then because Amari has been on life support 6 times, we almost lost her 6 times, and you reach a point where it's like, am I just being selfish of keeping her here? And so for me, I teeter with it, and it's one of the hardest decisions that you could ever make in life, but you know, it's like, if you make it out of this, you are meant, but 6 times is hard. It's hard on you to sit there and watch it, and it's hard on her. So it was the hardest decision I had to make, but we did it.
Yeah, we don't have one, but we've talked about it, but we don't have it set up at this point.
Yeah, we don't have one either. You know, we talked a lot about what the vision is for the LGS Foundation. It's to end the devastation and suffering caused by LGS, because I don't want to live in a world without the Amaris and the Charleses, right, and the Neves and the Aarons, right, and the Devons. But I also, why does it have to come at the hands of so much suffering? So, Darla, you're going to bring us home and tell us what your advice would be for newly diagnosed families.
Well, I was thinking we were introduced as, you know, the caregiver expert panel, and I don't feel like an expert. I feel like an expert on my own kid and my own experience. And so I would say to you, all of you, newly diagnosed, or maybe it's your first time at an LGS conference, that you are the expert of your own kid. And I've had conversations already where people express the guilt of trying something that didn't work, or the guilt of not trying something that could have worked, of making a decision when to give the rescue med. All of those things, those are really hard decisions. And so I would say that you are relentlessly crazy about your kid and doing the best, and look at you here learning and growing. And so trust your gut, and don't, it's hard to just say don't feel guilty about things, but we're too hard on ourselves. We really are.
We are.
So you are doing your best, and you're doing a phenomenal job.
Thank you.
One thing is that we were saying our kids may not have milestones, but they have inch stones.
Yes,
They
do.
celebrate the inch stones.
Inch stones.
yes.
That's
Yeah.
great. So all of our speakers are here at the conference. They're going to be at the reception tonight, I believe. They're going to be at breakfast and lunch tomorrow, so you can ask questions and speak to them about, and I hope you will talk to them. And then tomorrow morning, if you come to the session, you will hear all about the great programs the LGS Foundation has. If they're wearing a blue shirt, it's because they're a volunteer and they're probably in this program supporting people, so I hope you will do that. But let's give our panel a round of applause. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Good job.